Turtles all the way down. I'm Jake, sometimes Jenk. I used to play on my high school basketball team, and we had this coach who was quite up on what was then something new, which was this sports psychology, pop psychology, Psychology Today magazine articles, which he had been reading, and he'd found new and interesting ways to kind of manipulate and kind of hack us into becoming better players. And one of these things that he came up with that he'd read about was that he asked us to do this. He said, before you go to bed tonight, I want you all to just, close your eyes and imagine you're at the foul line and you've got the ball in your hand, and just go through the motions of doing a successful foul shot. Just exactly imagine yourself doing it and the ball is going through the hoop. And do this, I can't remember if he said 10 times or 50 times, some amount. And he claimed that this would make us better foul throw shooters. And there does seem to be some research that this works. And why does it seem to work? Well, I kind of think of it in terms of, when you're walking along a field and you see that there's been kind of paths have been carved out through the grass by people walking on them. And, the first time the person walks in that direction, you might not even notice much happening there. And then a few other people walk over it. And, after many repetitions, a pathway starts to form, and it becomes kind of the default easy way for other people who enter that field to go through, because there's a pathway, so I'll just take that, and it just becomes reinforced. In some ways, when you're about to take a actual free throw shot in basketball and you're at the foul line, you've got the ball in your hand, a lot of things come into play. You've got your body systems, your knees bend, your shoulders, the way you're holding the ball with the two hands in relation to each other. A whole bunch of things are going on. Some of it is just your body kind of springing down, springing up. Some of it is you thinking in terms of, where am I going to place my hand and where do I want this ball to go? And then your eyes, and you're trying to control. Now, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of systems at play. Some of them are body systems. Some of them are mind systems. A lot of them are obviously interconnected sets of these systems at play to get you to do a successful free throw shot at the foul line in a basketball game. Now, when you're got your eyes closed at night and you're just imagining it, but you're not actually doing it, what's happening there? You're still using these pathways. You're creating these neuronal pathways, or you're reinforcing some. And so some subset of these cyclones or body systems and mind systems that are at play when you're really doing it, some subset of these, and namely the abstract ones, the imagined ones, are still being done when you're just imagining it. It's just the body ones aren't kind of accompanying it. So when you go the next day to the actual basketball court and you've gone through all these basically running simulations in your mind, these abstract recreations, these visualizations of the actual thing that you're about to do, well, you've already had some practice. Not the whole thing, it's not entirely the same, but these mind cyclones or processes, these imaginations, these visualizations that you're going to be doing essentially when you actually throw that basketball, you've already done some of them. So it's like the body has an easier time going along with these pathways that have already been formed, and it kind of adheres to what you've kind of started and reinforced in these imaginings. And when you do actually hold that basketball in your hand and the body starts doing what it needs to, I'm guessing it's got to be easier. The pathways are already there. It's kind of a shortcut has been done. And this is a practice. And, this is the word that you hear all the time when it comes to certain things like, yoga practice, a Tai Chi practice, martial arts practice. It's a practice in this very same way, I think. And there's also, reminds me of this, speaking of these kind of practices, just earlier today I came across this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, and didn't write it down, but something to the effect of sometimes your joy is the cause of your smile, and sometimes your smile is the cause of your joy. And we have, this kind of points to me a wisdom of an interplay, a cooperation going on within us. In our Western culture, there's this thing that you hear quite a bit, and the saying goes, "Fake it till you make it." And, that kind of has some negative connotations, I think, mainly because of the word fake. You think, ugh, fake, that doesn't sound good. I don't think I'm not into fake. So maybe that shouldn't be the word. Maybe it should be something like practice it till you make it. Because in the way that fake it till you make it works, so does practice it till you make it works. I mean, for example, let's say someone gave you that advice to be confident. Pretend that you're confident. When you go in a room, act like you're confident. Fake that you're confident. And then eventually you'll become confident. There's some truth to that. But if you're actually able to go into a room and teach yourself to appear to be confident, to basically calm the storms within you, to arrive at a state of a lack of frenzy, I would say you're not faking it. You're actually exhibiting confidence. That is confidence. And you've kind of achieved it just by trying to achieve it in a way. And what we call, I guess, easy confidence or true confidence, you might want to kind of, compare those two, is about a confidence that comes easily because it's been practiced so much that it becomes your nature, right? So, as I talk about these body systems and mind systems, I've always thought about myself as being kind of split inside in many ways, and sometimes you can see that it's basically two entities inside you, and that's kind of the easiest way to compartmentalize ourselves, and that pretty much lines up with the mind-body type delineation that we talk about. Now, I don't know if you want to talk about whether or not there is such a distinction in quotation marks in reality. I mean, what does that even mean? I like to think that this is a framework in which to talk about these systems that are apparent to us. And, it's not such a clear-cut division between body and mind. I know that, but there's kind of a collection of type of processes that are kind of similar, and we call them body systems. And there's a collection of processes and systems that we call mind systems, and they would be the abstract things, the ideas, the thoughts, the semiotics, the symbols, the realm of ideas, not of the body. So I've always thought that there's this kind of interplay going on, and in my case, those two sides could be kind of thought of like the mind systems are kind of like, if you had to personify them, are kind of like the mind is kind of like the mansplainer in chief. It has all the answers. It seems to be very confident about things and give their opinion and figure stuff out, and once it's arrived at an answer, seems to be quite confident about it. Now, the body is a totally different kind of thing. It's almost as if my body and these systems inside are kind of like, well, if the mind is a mansplainer, kind of a know-it-all, the body is kind of like a non-verbal autistic genius of some sort. I mean, it knows how to do stuff, and rationally, and with the mind, when you look at it, you think, how the hell does it know how to do this? And it just seems kind of magical and mysterious. I mean, some things that that the body is capable of are, it seems, almost magical. How intuition is what we tend to call these things, and quite often it does kind of veer people into this magical type of thinking about the capacities of the human, and these are the capacities generally I find of the body. because it's outside of our understanding in a linguistic sense, we kind of see it as kind of this nonverbal autistic genius. But that part, those systems, that body, that autistic genius is kind of in charge of a lot of things. It's in charge of like the mood settings, the alertness, physical well-being, the temperature thermostat, So if you are comprised of these two systems at play, how does the mind, the abstract that functions on the level of language, communicate with and cooperate with and cohabitate with the other side, the body systems, that are visual and visceral, not verbal or textual? It's about feelings and images, and less about the actual symbolic representation of these things within the verbal or the textual. So maybe we'll make a little distinction here. I think there's some people that would probably claim that that there is no mind without language. There's some people that take this position, that this might explain why people can't seem to remember anything before they learn to talk. That seems to be more or less an overlap of timing there. And some will tell you that that's because when you learn, and in fact, let's go back even further. Let's go back to our species here. It seems like when we started noticing how to do this, which is take one thing and have it stand for the meaning of another thing, like a word, an image, a symbol, a grunt, a motion, what have you. We had, at that point come into kind of a semiotic way of seeing the world. It just opened up and branched out into so many possibilities that we're kind of bringing to fruition now. Once you have that, it's almost like a huge paradigm shift. It's a giant leap forward in terms of what you can do now in this system. You've got body systems kind of functioning on, what you could maybe think of like a typical mammal might be what we call like the flow state. And these are obviously very simplistic ways for us to understand it, but it does help us to understand it. So they're functioning on this, visual and visceral level. Once you have this ability to manipulate, well, first of all, to come up with symbols, signs, and manipulate them, and then pass them between each other. We create this game where we're playing that every time this is grunted, the other person knows what you mean, because that grunt is somehow encapsulating an idea and it's being projected to you as sound. And in your system, that sound then converts into another behavior. And this is revolutionary. And the mind is kind of like that as you're growing up. Maybe once you get to around the age of 2 and you're learning to speak, this way of thinking would say that that's when your mind is actually being created. This abstract layer to you, where you will, for most of us, reside in, a way of being for a large part of your day, and some more than others, it seems, and some less than others. So congratulations, you've reached a level of language, the ability to manipulate and transmit symbols, and you now have a mind. You're now in possession of a mind, and you've always had a body, and it was going along and working quite well before you came along. I mean, it's got some very basic body systems at play, which are, your heart beating and breathing and all that stuff that's going on. That's very low level amygdala type functions, and then you've got some other higher functions of the body that might be like affection and hunger and at the biological level. These have always been at play, and now you introduce this mind into it, and that's a whole bunch of other cycles and processes within this large system that we call you. So within you, there's all these things happening. One side is communicating. I mean, we're talking in size now. So let me talk about myself. Okay. So within me, I've got this mind, and I've got this, which is the mind is kind of this abstract, high-level thinker that speaks in words and ideas and logic. And then you've got this other group of systems that we call the body systems. And they're kind of like our nonverbal autistic genius, and it knows some amazing, it's got skills. We don't really know how, but it's, so, a lot of the things I've been doing kind of relate to this, this dichotomy that kind of has been at play within me. It seems like, and if you'd known me growing up, you would have characterized me as being kind of a, maybe even overly logical, rational, know-it-all smartass, maybe. But, I wasn't ostracized for it, so I guess it couldn't have been that bad. But, and then, having discovered that, hey, there's a whole other side of me, all these body systems that I associate with things like emotions. And once I discovered that, I realized that I had a lot of work to do. So I guess I'd have to say I gave myself over more to the body and gave it more respect. Listened to these things going on within me, respecting it in the sense of listening, but also reacting and taking into consideration when I'm making my decisions. For example, I might have for years gone along and did things that made me feel horrible all the time, but I decided was a good thing to do. And once you realize that, oh, you know what, the body's kind of giving me this reaction, these signals, it's behaving in a certain way that's making it obvious that it's uncomfortable. So my body's uncomfortable. I'm anxious doing this. I don't actually like it. And once you listen to that and you see your reactions, it's very informative. Like, why then am I continuing to do this if it's not working for me? And you don't get to this until you listen to those body systems. And what I think I did in my personal case was probably to go and swing that pendulum a little too far in the other direction. I kind of went off into this musical journey in a way. And that's why I almost think of it as a different part of me, and I call that kind of the jank side, the body side, and the mind is kind of the Jake side that talks a lot. And in giving myself over to the body side, I probably went a little too far, and when you do go in that direction, there is a marked increase in the probability of you going insane. That's true. But I think it's the case in both directions. If you go too far off into the, giving all of the levers of power to the mind, and everything is thought out and, figured out in advance and calculated, you're going to miss a lot of these emergent effects and intuition type knowledge that are not apparent within that framework, within the mind, viewing things and reacting and making decisions only with regard to logic and textual information. Now, in doing so and giving that, I think I made the mistake of thinking that because I discovered my body finally and its importance, and by giving myself more to that side, I felt that, I had somehow, gone too far in one direction, and now I'm kind of gone far in the other direction, so therefore it's balanced out. No, that's kind of silly when you, again, maybe there's a higher mind on top of both of these, but at some point I stop and think and I realize, no, it's not that. It's now, I've gone too far in one direction and far in another direction, and now they're balanced and averaged out. No, that's not the way it works. I haven't really figured out how to effectively get them to cooperate. And I'm better at it, of course. But lately I've been thinking more in those terms. And so how does the mind talk to the body? Well, the body, as I said, doesn't really respond to words. You can't really convince it of something by, giving it abstract ideas. So how do we do it? I mean, there seems to be very old traditions that seem to have, clued into this. So, I would say, what's one thing that is so basic in the body systems that's going to affect everything. And that, of course, it becomes obvious if you're trying to create your own martial art or your own kind of a practice to have the body work with the mind. What would you come up with? You'd probably come up with breathing is a great place to start, because, well, it's required for everything. If you stop breathing, then nothing else is going to work. And if you breathe in kind of a regular manner, in a calm way, it's kind of interesting. It's this fake it till you make it starts to come in. It's that if you're breathing, if you consciously decide to breathe in a calm manner, your body's not verbal. It says, oh, you know, hey, everything's kind of in a calm manner right now. So it calms other systems down. It turns down some alarms and sounds, and it smooths out other processes, and other processes start to act more regularly, like, you know, your heartbeat and your flows of, I don't know, fluids and salts through your body. Who knows? I mean, all kinds of things start to become more regularized, because they're all kind of operating on that very basic substrate of breathing. So, you know, I think of something like Tai Chi. Again, something I think I brought up a few times now. I haven't really started yet, but it seems like the kind of thing that I need to look more into, because it's kind of an example of your mind, in a way. I don't want to say tricking or faking, but it's practicing something, and it's doing so, it's getting the body to practice something. And the way the body likes to do things, well, it likes repetition, it likes predictability, it likes comfort, it likes regularity, it likes calm. So, you know, when you do Tai Chi, when you start it, it's kind of like the same for almost any kind of a workout. It's an effort until you get there. When you get started, the reason it's no longer an effort is because your substrate has changed. Once you start breathing regularly, once you start moving your body and you start getting the blood flows and the fluids and everything else in certain regular patterns, your body starts reacting as if it's calm, and it starts calming other systems down again. And once you do that enough, it becomes kind of a habitual thing. You start to react in those ways because you've built those pathways of calm regularity. You've built those pathways in the park. You walk through them so many times that in your regular day, when you're not doing that practice, and something comes up that's similar, you might actually react in that way because it's actually a practiced way of being for you. It's actually a path of least resistance that you want to be a path of least resistance. And that path is a path of calm and smooth, and not a jaggedness, and not an anxious reaction. So it's kind of like a, I think the Greeks called it mimesis. It's and it's also spoken of as being the basis of a lot of art, in that you're miming, you're repeating the patterns that are seen in nature. And in the case of learning how to do a particular art, the idea is to actually copy a master, over and over again, until you kind of internalize these pathways of doing a certain particular art. I don't know if you happen to be a painter, calligrapher, or whatever, and you part of the practice of that is that, and maybe more so in the past, was to essentially mimic mimesis, the copying of these masters that have good results. And by doing that, you set these pathways into motion, and then hopefully you can then build upon that and make your own pathways. But you're kind of given a substrate of skills on which to build with. So I'm starting to, notice this more and think in these terms, which is to have a better dance between my body and mind. Not so much give myself up all the way to one, or give myself up all the way to the other at certain times in kind of extreme parts of the pendulum, and then think I've achieved the balance in my life and in my being, in my system that we call Jake, Jank, what have you. that's not really finding a healthy dance between the two. So, I'm trying to do more of that. And the way to do that, I guess, is more things like Tai Chi and exercise and yoga. Now, all of these, when we speak in terms of an individual, it seems like an ideal state of mind and body, an ideal state of being to be in is in which those two schools of systems are dancing and functioning together. So you can see many examples of this happening. When if you've ever seen a jazzgasm, that's what I call it. I don't even know if there's such a word, but if you watch somebody with their eyes closed and listening to some kind of esoteric music, and you can almost sometimes see the person going into kind of an ecstatic fit. It's like this is an abstract patterns. A group of patterns are being created. Through the creativity of an individual or a group. It's being transmitted in an abstract way through the air as waves and patterns of air. It goes into the ear of this person. It vibrates the hairs and the cochlear. It then triggers a bunch of electrical impulses going into the brain, and the brain, because it's been used to certain pathways going in certain directions, sends off a whole bunch of other processes at play, and a bunch of other cyclones start going into motion, which triggers some body responses of pleasure. And then, a whole bunch of other endorphins are released. And it's almost like the person kind of goes on a mini trip, a psychedelic trip. And I would say, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Certain neurotransmitters are moving around, increasing in concentrations in certain parts of the brain and the body. And they're having a trip. And I don't think of this as such a big deal. I think this might sound revolutionary to some people. I don't know. But we're all living in hallucinations. That's really all we have access to. It's, we have this physical substrate of a body. We've got this brain, we've got, systems within our gut, and all this network of connectivity that's within our body, this giant network that's connected together. And, most of us have pretty much the same levers, of levels of these things. Like most of us are within a similar range. So it's almost like most of us are taking the same psychedelic. We're taking the same hallucinogen, which most of us have kind of been born within this range. Now, that's not all of us. There are some of us that have the levers in different concentrations. Some are high, some are low, and it's not just neurotransmitters. It's a whole bunch of processes at play, but they're different in some sense. And so maybe they're different in such an important sense that they don't fit in. We call them a bunch of names, But even, I think of what is a person with a schizophrenia or some other thing that we point to, autism or what have you, or anything, or even genius, or, that sort of thing, where other than, we tend to think of it in terms of, well, we look for clues in the body. What is it about the, the neurotransmitters in this person or these group of people? And then we find that the group of people that are depressed tend to have this neurotransmitter in such supply around here. So we think, oh, well, that's different from a person who's not depressed. So all we really have to do is change that neurotransmitter setting, change that lever, and then things will be okay. It doesn't always seem to work that way. In fact, I'd be surprised if that worked, but it does work. And in some cases, maybe that's all it is. It's just so much of one thing that's off balance that you can maybe change that setting, and it might bring you back into the hallucination that we're all more or less in. There's always this. We've always talked about the madness and genius, for example. And it's, whether it's somebody who's a genius, who's crazy, who's an outlier, who's maybe a historical hero or a villain, these are kind of like outliers. And in most cases, I would say they're kind of on a different trip than the consensus. And in some ways, if it's just on the fringes of it, I mean, I tend to think I've been kind of skirting this all my life, and that I realize I'm different. Part of me wants to just go there, but I realize that it's different enough from the what most people seem to be tripping on, that it's going to be considered crazy. So I kind of have to compromise a little bit and kind of function within hallucination that's not really mine. And when the one we're operating within, we're all used to, and we've kind of, learned to deal with it, and most of us get along. If we can't, we don't fit in. So one of our guests, Karen Campbell, who was on a recent episode, by the way, I'm going to claim a senior's moment on that episode because during the monologue, I called her Karen Hamilton instead of Karen Campbell. It was Karen Campbell. And she sent me this study. She's a cognitive psychologist, and since then I've received it from a couple of people as well, and various versions of it. But the research was about, the study had been done basically to see whether or not a psychedelic state of consciousness is a so-called, in quotation marks, higher state of consciousness than a regular waking state of consciousness. And they were able to devise this experiment in this way, in that, we have these ways to measure and compare, states of consciousness already. And that is, when we compare the waking state to a lesser state, like being in a coma, being asleep, being in various states of disarray, what have you, they're able to do these experiments and then compare the results, and based on, as best as we can right now, figure out what it means to be a more higher level of consciousness. We see that there are clear differences that you can point to between those. So we take that next step and say, okay, well, let's compare that regular base state, which I call the hallucination that we're all kind of, most of us are participating in, and we compare it to what's called a psychedelic state. That is something that changes that into another state. And the ones that they did the experiments were with psilocybin, which is the component of magic mushrooms, with LSD, and with ketamine, which I don't really understand necessarily because I haven't taken it. But the first two I'm quite familiar with. And what they found was that in much the same way that you saw those differences in the results between the regular state and what we call the lesser aware states, you see a similar difference between the regular state being at the lower level in this case and the more complex, higher level of consciousness that you see on when somebody's experiencing psychedelics. I mean, that's no surprise to me or probably anybody who has taken psychedelics. It certainly does feel like you're smarter. You have access to more things. It almost seems like you have access to different frequencies that you're not normally tuned into, that have been there all the time. And in some cases, and in my case, they feel oddly familiar. And you kind of have this sense of, oh, I missed you, this sense of higher consciousness and this way of being. And I'm kind of chalking this up to maybe I had more of these kind of endorphin type things running through me when I was going through puberty and being a young man. And you're just, the vitality of youth and the different chemistry makeup within your body. It was more similar to the psychedelic higher state of being that I get to than my now normal setting, which seems a bit more subdued maybe in comparison to that. So, there's this sense that there's this idea about gating. When you're in a regular everyday consciousness, and as you grow and live within the world, what you learn to do is you learn to ignore information. You gate out the frequencies. That's actually what leads to our success in functioning. It's that if you happen to be one of those, people that did not learn to do this, in which case everything is coming in all at once, you're probably one of these people that are diagnosed with certain ways of being that make you incapable of, not being overwhelmed by what's coming in. And so what you do is you learn to kind of gate it out and, let in certain bits of information and ignore other bits. And you learn to do this intuitively through practice, which ones you can basically get away with ignoring over time and which ones you have to pay attention to. Now, what psychedelics seem to do, and these studies seem to point to this being the case, is that the gating is somewhat switched off. That is what is normally, some of these systems, like maybe some of these mind systems, when they're on, some of these body systems are turned off because, I don't know why, maybe the resource issue, maybe you can't, maybe it's just more efficient. Maybe it would be exhausting to have them all on at once, but some of those shut off. And when some of those body systems are on, some of the mind ones shut off. And there's a clear example of this, and advertisers and propagandists know this, is that when somebody feels under threat, that is, the body triggers are on, these cyclones are moving around and of fear and survival and those more basic primitive ones, once they start gaining some traction, once those cycles start going, in their own direction, many of these abstract mind cycles, processes actually shut down, or at least are diminished in their capacity. That's clearly shown. If you ever get into and the only remaining source of embarrassing source of a rage reaction that I get these days is it's like a traffic road rage type thing. And if you ever in one of those states, you realize that the mind, after you come back and think, what the hell was I thinking? Like, it just totally shuts down. You're not thinking. But when you're on psychedelics, here's the interesting thing. It seems like all of those stay on, or many of them stay on, or more of them are more visible, and you have more access to the things that you always have access to, just not all at once, or not in those same concentrations. So that's why it seems kind of strange, and it seems kind of amazing, and it seems kind of full, and sometimes overwhelming, and it is. And that's why people quite often get overwhelmed, is because you're getting a flood of information, none of which is magical or you don't normally have capacity to access, but you're accessing a lot of them at once, and you're accessing them maybe with greater clarity at the same time. So it leads to what's often described as a mind-blowing experience, and that's true. So, having gone through these psychedelic experiments and trips, the one thing that it's, if anything, that it's given me is this ability to notice that there is I don't want to say arbitrary, but, there's kind of a different ways of being that you can switch between. And just noticing that makes a world of difference. And of course, you're noticing that through the mind cycles. So in some sense, I have to give some primacy to my mind over my body, in the sense that I trust it, to make long-term decisions. Maybe I trust the body to make short-term decisions. Sometimes your intuition, how you're reacting, your gut feeling, quite often that ends up being probably more accurate than what you, slave through in terms of, logical, construction of premises and conclusion and whatever you're thinking through. Quite often, if it's something that's kind of a short-term thing, the body gets it right more often than the mind. But in terms of long-term decisions, the mind seems to be a lot better because it can conceive of the future. It can conceive of different alternate ways of being. It can conceive of thought experiments and simulations and other circumstances to realize, oh, this is the best decision for me. The best decision for me, the system called me, is actually to enroll in a Tai Chi class so that I learn how to do these body movements. And these body movements are going to get, the substrate of the body in a kind of a calmer setting, which is going to allow my mind to actually make better decisions because it's now functioning within a system that's actually calmer and more regulated and more efficient. And then once the mind is able to take advantage of this, it's going to make some continued good decisions for the body. So it's kind of this virtuous circle that we could hope for. And I find myself constantly reinventing or rediscovering this. It's like every few years I discover this and I go, shit, I forgot about that. I got to do it this way. And I kind of get on a good path, and then I somehow kind of lose track of that and float back into this other way of path of least resistance, which, could be characterized and seen as a behavior in term to be laziness and, sloth. And that creeps in. And, there's got to be some kind of a higher level mind that jumps in and every now and then restarts this process and says, let's learn this physical practice so that it fits within this virtual circle of the system, which is me, which is a system of body systems, it's a system of mind systems, it's a system of blended systems. And they're all kind of working together, and they shouldn't be at odds with each other, which is what you'll have if you you give more of the reins to one side or the other. The idea is to let them each do what they do best. Make rational decisions about important things, and let your body do the things that it's good at, and in the intuitions, and listen to them. But I still kind of, these days what I'm doing is I'm listening to my body intuitions. Ideally, this is what I'm doing. And then kind of, working it out with the mind and then using both, hopefully. But ultimately, it's the mind that decides if you have enough time, to contemplate something. But pay attention to the body. Don't give it all the reins to it. And, there's this word called integration that is often used, I think, to mean somebody who's kind of an integrated personality. And they talk about integration after psychedelic trips. The idea is to integrate that experience and what you've learned, and so that you're integrating different parts of you. And this is kind of how I see it. It's integrating, but I think maybe a better word is maybe something like cooperating, kind of a less gated way of being. But at the same time being wary that maybe there's a reason why we can't be in that higher consciousness all the time. Maybe, as I said, it could be overwhelming for the body. So, this is why it's a practice, I think. If you look at somebody who's doing an exhaustive physical workout, you think, it doesn't seem before the workouts begin that this person's going to be able to bench press 300 pounds, but they're able to learn and practice and get there. So I feel that I'm kind of confident that while this what I call or what I experience to be a higher psychedelic state, and it might be silly to think that you could be in that state all the time, but certain things that you learn from that, certain pathways that you start on in those states, like a practice, like working out, get easier. And there are pathways that are become a better path of least resistance. I kind of have some optimism that I'm going to kind of train myself to be able to, practice cooperating within these systems within me, to have I don't know what you'd call it, a happier system. Let's call it happier, whatever that is. Now that I think of it, what I've just been describing as this dichotomy within me sounds very much like the movie Rain Man, in which you have two brothers. You've got the Tom Cruise character, who's kind of this strategic, rational, gaming, know-it-all kind of character, who turns out is not actually succeeding in the world despite all of his great talents. And then on the other side of things, you've got the brother played by the Dustin Hoffman character, who is kind of quite explicitly, mostly nonverbal autistic genius, who has all these incredible skills, that don't seem to make sense to the perspective of the mind from Tom Cruise character perspective, and the experience of essentially the body that the Dustin Hoffman character is going through. That trip that he's on does not seem, or from within that perspective, the goings on of the mind of the Tom Cruise character doesn't seem to make sense. But what's interesting is that, and this seems to be the project that I'm engaged in, that I'm describing right now, is finding a way for them to optimally work together, or to better work together. And in the movie, we find that when they do, an amazing partnership bond forms, and they are able to be better together. That's two separate individuals, but the analogy follows through. It's kind of how I'm doing it. I've got this Tom Cruise kind of a guy in my head, and I've got this Dustin Hoffman type guy in my head. And the way that they work together is that instead of trying to, convince, the nonverbal side of me, you have to kind of stroke it, calm it, make it at peace, change a substrate so that, the messages can get through. And those messages don't need to be verbal and abstract. Anyway, here I am, as usual, thinking I'm only going to speak for about 10 minutes or so, and I guess we've gone over 40 minutes now. But we had a conversation, with my old friend Andy Keene, who is a well-known documentary film director who's actually come to known for a couple of award-winning films that focus on the world of the art of music. And most recently, he did one that he got a lot of attention for called Bobcaygeon. Putting a lens on to the world of the Tragically Hip and Gord Downie, which if you're not from Canada, you might not have even heard too much about them. But if you are from Canada, you realize that they're, a very large and important part of our culture. So we started off talking about that. And as is usual, we went off in all kinds of directions. And there will be some music at the end of this episode that will be based on some of the samples, clips from our conversation. I hope to do this with every episode. So I hope you enjoy it. Talk soon. So, do you like these mics?
Not sure.
Sure.
Oh, like is it
Shure 58?
Oh yeah, it's the
Yeah.
rock and roll.
Yeah. I think it's the one that a lot of rock singers and comedians like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the one I use.
Is that, yeah. So I guess these days, when you look up Andy Keene online, you see a lot of connections and references to the Tragically Hip these days. You've made some kind of a real connection with that part of our culture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's still what comes up. Maybe that means I have to do something else. But, yeah, and then of course last summer with the tour,
mm-hmm.
they were all over the news, and it was actually pretty exciting because I got to be
mm-hmm.
involved again, and it kind of brought new life back to the film. And
so did you go around with them on that big tour?
No.
Did you do like a part two of Bobcaygeon kind of thing?
No, I did not. But they did make a film. I was at a couple of the shows, but only as a fan and a buddy of the hip, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, I guess that is still, it's when you do work with them, you become part of a larger family, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're kind of like Canadian royalty.
Yeah. It was definitely an honor to work with them for sure, and I will never forget it. And I stay in touch with Gord, and it's a pretty special relationship. He's a great person. So,
I kind of consider him to be a poet. I don't know if you... Yeah. It's also kind of interesting because I got the impression, looking around to some of his fans and some of the Tragically Hip fans, I got the realization that for a lot of people, these are... maybe I don't want to generalize, but let's say like growing up in Hamilton and you see a lot of, it's kind of like a macho industrial kind of culture, right? So no one's going to seek out poetry or talk about reading poetry or, but on the other hand, when you listen to the Tragically Hip and Gord's lyrics and his performance, it's almost like, there's a way for people who wouldn't normally, admit to liking poetry, that's actually what they're doing. They're kind of appreciating, that.
Yeah, it's true. I guess it's a way in. Yeah, it's a way in for people who either wouldn't normally want to weigh in or have an interest, but and I don't know, maybe even some of those people who we're talking about would still not refer to it as poetry.
Exactly,
it's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's singing about.
That's right.
Hey, I've been to that place.
That's right.
Yeah,
but it's almost like I grew up in this environment. I don't know what it was like for you, but that wouldn't be something that you would admit to, like enjoying that kind of thing, because it seemed kind of effete or something like that. It was kind of you wouldn't do it. Yeah,
it is. Going back there now, it's a bit in the distance in the rearview mirror, but I talked to so many hardcore Tragically Hip fans making the film. I mean, the idea behind it, as you may or may not know, was to make a type of thank you letter for the Tragically Hip to their fans.
Right.
And sort of present it around this celebratory show in the small town of Bobcaygeon. And so in meeting these people, they come from all walks of life. That's another amazing part of this band, is that they touch people from all walks. I don't know that a lot of bands can say they they do that. But so many of them, everyone wants to talk about what certain songs mean to them. And I just want to bring it back around to that, the poetry side of things, because I think that is what Gord is, a poet.
Yeah.
But I don't know how important it is that we know exactly what it is that he's saying. Of course. And maybe that's in brackets next to the word poem anyway.
Right, exactly.
Leave it up to you. Leave it up to the reader.
It's
leave
kind
it up
of
to the
interminable.
listener.
Yeah, does he consider himself a poet? Well,
oh, yeah.
I guess, yeah, okay.
For sure. Yeah. He did that book. He did a book called, a book of poems called Coke Machine Glow that was probably, in the last 15 years. And then with the Charlie Wenjack book that they did, Secret Path, let's hope we get all the names right. This past year, they released that beautiful animated book, and then they did the film around it. It's all poems in there, and they can either be interpreted as lyrics for songs or what have you. But it's a book of poems. And that's another one. Sorry, just to talk about how, like, the access or the people it touches. I mean, for instance, so CBC did this special airing of that 1 hour animated film, Secret Path. It was, driven by those beautiful drawings, but then the narration was the poetry written by Gord. And, I have two kids who are young, under 12, who were brought to tears watching that.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're glued, just glued from beginning to end. It's not a happy story, but it's something that for some reason appealed to them. It's about a student, I guess. It's about a school. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, and if you, like you said, it's kind of a broad range of people that you can reach. That to me seems like it's of higher significance as a cultural thing.
Yeah. And I don't think any artist sets out to do that.
Right.
I think.
Well, some might. They're megalomaniacs.
That's true. Yeah, but it's a sensibility that he has. Yeah. It's the soul, right? Or
it often works better because it's more authentic that way. Yeah. Whatever that means to us. Yeah. When you're not trying too hard, it seems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a Canadian thing too, anyway, isn't it? Like you don't want to be perceived to be trying too hard.
Right. Yeah. I know we're judgmental. I guess. Yeah. More often, I've heard myself say that about people with their. He's trying too hard, or they're trying too hard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you think when you think of Andy. You're a pretty calm and mellow guy, actually.
Well, thank you. This is fun to be doing this, Jake. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm glad to see you again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Have you been on a podcast before?
Never. Yeah. And, I've done some radio stuff. I've done, phone calls that get broadcast somewhere. But I guess, what do they say now? When they say you have a beautiful face for radio, now I've got a beautiful
face for podcast.
Yeah, I wonder.
Got to update it.
If I've got a beautiful face for podcast.
But I remember you were doing some pretty funny videos as well, with an alter ego of a TV chef.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever go back to that?
That's right. I did show that too.
Yeah, that was fun
stuff. I was in love with that guy for so long and still am. But yeah, I shopped it around. He was a hack chef who was trying to find. He was actually his roots were in rock and roll. I guess he was a washed up, bar. He was a bar band guy who decided to take a second crack at.
That's the backstory.
Yeah, that's the backstory. Yeah. And then he thought he'd take his talents into the kitchen. Or maybe the story was that there was a producer who thought they could make money by putting him in the kitchen and making an idiot of him. So, yeah, we did the one. And I don't know. And he also had a fake British accent, which he thought made him sophisticated.
Perfect. But yeah, you can definitely see the hints of like Larry Sanders that came up earlier in our conversation, right? It's that masterful approach to things that combining reality and funny.
Yeah. Whatever that is, like breaking down that fourth wall or like going behind the scenes, and we all have seen great, other sort of not imitations per se, but things that have grown out of the Larry Sanders stuff, and that was definitely, that was. Alive and Cooking was the name of the show.
Alive and Cooking, that's right.
And it definitely came from that world.
Yeah. Is that person breathing again someday?
I hope. I mean, he does come out the odd time.
Yeah,
just
at home in the kitchen.
Yeah, just putting together the odd coq au vin. But no, I'd love to do something with him. But at the same time, as anyone who makes stuff, and we all know that you sort of, I guess you got to put a time frame on certain ideas. Not that that character's gone forever, but I love to be able to move on and be excited about new things that can actually maybe take over from that.
Right. And what are those new things these days? Like what?
I guess so. Actually, just like right now, it's an interesting time because I'm just almost the last couple of months. I've really had a lot of time to just work on some of my own stuff, develop some new ideas, and so in those, I am making some short documentary, like sort of music related films, but or vignettes we'll call them. But no, I do. There's something in me that really wants to. I want to do a scripted thing, and I love television as a platform. I love the internet, and so I'm writing some episodic stuff around or like for that. I mean, we'll see where it goes.
In a comedic vein,
I guess it is, but not in a sort of sitcom type way, but maybe more in a way that is just someone. If the main character is someone who can laugh at themselves, but it's otherwise maybe a serious scenario that's more everyday. A great reference. I was so excited by Louis C.K.'s online thing that he did, that Horace and Pete.
Oh yeah, I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, which I just, and we don't need to talk a ton about it, but it's something to definitely check out if you have an interest in sort of the future of television, if that's what we're going to call it, or storytelling.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that these days. The future of television. And, even if there will be such a thing as television,
right.
It's already a kind of a blend. They're screens, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you're viewing it?
Well, yeah, or just in a way to get, it's a very different path. I mean, look what we're doing now. It's a very different path to get stuff in front of eyes online than it is if you wait for a broadcast license and some TV execs to tell you that this story's not working for us.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, lucky Louis gets to make a show and put it out within a couple of weeks. I mean, that was a really interesting part of Horace and Pete, is that there were elements. It takes place in a bar, so it's bar talk, like whatever, like from the stool, and people are talking about. It feels like they're talking about current events. They're talking about things that were in the news a week before, and you're watching it in a TV show. That hasn't been done.
Yeah, that's true, right? That's an odd feeling when you see that.
Yeah, I mean, you see it on late night, on live talk shows, but you don't see it in scripted. Like, this is a stage play, really.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. I've seen, I guess, the 1.5 episodes of it, and very much like a theatrical experience.
Yeah,
and I think it's South Park also, if I'm not mistaken, that they're doing some of the content the week that it airs, so they're pretty current sometimes in their politics. And whereas we growing up got used to being months or years behind some of the humor, but everyone's got to be on top of shit these days.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not checking into your Facebook feed, you're going to miss half the comedy.
Right.
that comes out.
Yeah. And I just think, I don't, just even thinking about that process would give it, it gives it a great energy, right? If you know that you're writing and producing something to be released within a short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's not overly polished. It's not overworked, and it carries this energy that you can't have otherwise, I think.
Yeah. Well, this is what we're trying to achieve here, I guess.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Next to no editing in this thing at all, so all their fuck-ups will stay in.
So, let's hope we get names and titles and all that stuff, right?
Embarrass ourselves.
Or I guess you can put a caveat. I guess there can be an asterisk. Or you have to run an apology at the next one, right?
Yeah. Disclaimer and everything. Yeah. But I kind of sense that I think of you kind of working in two streams. It's like you've got your one stream, which is this artist stream, and another one is kind of making content.
Yeah.
For other interests and corporations and everything else. So you do that as well. So yeah.
And yes, I've spent the last 2 years mainly doing that, and it's been fun, and I hope to keep doing it. So yeah, and I was in the commercial world, directing TV commercials, sort of very, part of that world 15 years ago probably, and then I'm just coming back to it at a time where it feels kind of really natural and exciting to go from, because I'm sort of this docu kind of real people guy, or that's where I've, honed my chops, I guess. Yeah. And now, with this sort of branded content, big brands are wanting to tell stories online because there's no walls, there's no time parameters. So we can build out a series. We can tell a 4-minute story about a family who gathers around Thanksgiving dinner and cooks mom's recipes.
And these are the kind of things that are welcome these days, this type of filmmaking. It's, I guess the world's finally catching up.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and from what all these people have their analytics and their measures of who's clicking on what and who's watching how much of what. And I think really what it comes down to is maybe advertisers are trying to reach that younger audience who don't want to be hit over the head with a product shot and a bunch of,
Well, yeah, they want to reach them like a Canadian in the sense that they don't want to look like they're trying to. Right.
This is happening outside of Canada, but
I get what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
because it works best that way. That's why we're so successful on the world stage as Canadians.
Yeah, where you never lose that label. So that's branded content. I mean, it seems to be. I think if we're going to talk about Canada compared to other countries or other markets, I think it took a bit longer for it to get here. But here it is, and so I think it's a way.
What is it? What do you mean when you say it?
Well, this branded content. I mean, big brands putting some of their or a bigger percentage of their marketing budget into advertising online, and advertising online looks a lot different than a 30-second spot with a product shot and a tag at the end. These are stories. These are almost these are engaging people on a different level. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
Do you ever see these kind of corporate interests actually partnering with an artist, but not controlling what they output? I mean, is there anyone that has that much trust in an artist where they could say, we're going to associate our name and brand with this artist, but we're going to let him choose what to do?
Yeah.
That seems kind of risky, right?
It has happened. And you know who? I think of Absolute Vodka. They did it. Right. They did it years ago, I think. They did it with print, I think, and they did it with. So I think they engaged visual artists or painters to do things. I think. I'm just going to throw this out there. Could be wrong. I think Spike Jonze was asked to make a film. I think Spike Jonze was asked to make a film for Absolute. I think it was them.
And it was a little familiar.
And it was a film, and I think they just said, oh no, and I thought of a more accessible one actually, but I think to finish that thought, I think, and it was a film that had where the characters wore cardboard boxes on their head and you couldn't see them, and I think it was just sort of voiceover, but it was just this sci-fi type thing, and there was no tie to the product at all. And I forget if there was a logo at the end even, I don't even know. But then the other more, one that got a lot of attention was that one that the kid Jesse did in New York for Nike, when Nike said they wanted to give him some money to make an online video, and he took the budget they gave him and went around the world with his buddy, and it just
it could still work.
It was like great, and then it was again, it was that it had that energy. There wasn't a lot of thought. There wasn't. There weren't tons of meetings about how this can be shaped to fit our brand.
Right.
It was it was people wearing shoes running through the frame in different parts of the world. It was pretty cool.
Do you get a lot of instruction like that? I mean, do you get a brief indicating what messages they're trying to get across when they do something like that, or is it implied and maybe they give you? I don't know. How does all that work?
It's pretty tight. I mean, in the doc world, of course. There's always surprises, and those often are the magical moments. But no, these are especially when you were talking about the bigger brands, they have their branding guidelines. They have their, a tag that they want to stick to. Now, I think it's maybe softening and they're becoming more lenient, if that's the word. But yeah, there's moments. These things are still scripted in a way that this, and they're still controlled in that, no, you can't show, that label in the kitchen, or you can't show that label at the track, or that kind of thing. But let's just say they are a lot more flexible in this world than they were.
Yeah, it seems like
when we're shooting a 30-second TV script.
Just by associating, with an artist, it seems to be, maybe that's all they need to do rather than trying to control a message. But that's hard to let go.
And I think, if you were, I think that becomes part of the ad. If you actually engage an artist who's really well known,
it's a lot of PR there.
Yeah, then that comes with it, right? It's like, we got Dave Chappelle, we got,
Right. Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah. So, but it is, what, the ad world is interesting. And for people like me who are, trying to make stuff and make their own stuff, it's when you have the chance to make these little films for these brands, it's great. And it's rewarding, and and you build new relationships, and then as you work more with these people, hopefully you sort of can shape things together and really feel like you're involved.
Yeah. Are you satisfying your artist side of things? Are you having enough time to do this? Because you're pretty busy with those other projects.
I don't know I don't know what makes it satisfied. I think I feel like, to take it back to the kitchen, I feel like that's why I love to be in the kitchen every day. Probably is because that means you're at least making something, right? And that sounds kind of hokey, but I think I don't know how it's satisfied, to be honest. I think you just do things and they come, they often fit into that mold or that sort of category of it being somewhat creative, and maybe that satisfies some little gland up in the brain somewhere. I'm not sure. But, no, listen, when you're making you're making some spot, we don't need to name the brands, but a 2-minute film for a big brand. Once you're into it, you're not thinking about the brand so much. Although there might be clients with you, you've got a large team of people helping you execute an idea, right? And it's therefore, then you're sort of like, okay, let's make this happen, and that's what you're doing for that time. And then the nice thing about doing the content is that a month later, it's done and it's out there.
Yeah, that's true, right? You don't have to.
Yeah. So
linger for a long time.
And we know, you've been through the film stuff. I mean, it's just it's a different process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's changed a lot in terms of, just a few years that I got involved in it, it seems to have radically changed as well. I mean, you can't seem to make middle budget films anymore. They don't really exist. They got to go $50 million superhero movie or something small.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's exciting. I mean, this year's, however much water we want to put in the Oscars, it's still an exciting night. People are being
And I watched
championed.
the whole thing this time. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that this film Moonlight, did what it did, even if it didn't win the big award, even if it had not, it still was something that was a small film that everyone talked about. And
that's pretty amazing when you think of it in those terms. Yeah.
Well, and La La Land is a small film too. So I guess that's a sign of the times. I mean, that guy. So it is pretty exciting. I mean, it's still, I think, a pretty exclusive castle where movies are being made. Yeah. But I think people are being kind of let in the door for the right reason, I think, or there's like, and it goes back to TV too. There's there's exciting things being made.
It's kind of democratizing the whole thing, just in terms of even the price of technology coming down. The cameras even on your iPhone are getting better and better. And you can imagine that there's acceptable levels of filmmaking with some very cheap equipment these days. So that's got to help things. I mean, artistically anyway.
Huge.
You gotta,
Well, now you have no excuse.
That's right.
Until you want to engage the big talent. I mean, really, if you have a story that you're itching to tell, you can shoot it on your phone. There was a film last year, and I won't try to guess at the title. It was a film made in Los Angeles, though. It was all shot on an iPhone. Yeah. And it had a really great sort of kinetic vibe to it because it was made on phones, right?
Yeah.
Some special lenses, but it does different things to the image, right? And it means you can put the camera in different places. So it's a whole new frontier. And I guess, we've been in this frontier now for a bit, but all this gear is changing by the minute, right? So,
are you changing the gear that you use these days? Has it changed much for you over the last few years?
Mainly, I learned through mostly the DPs who I work with about some gear, and I'm definitely a fan of cameras, and definitely I have a huge respect for the art of making the images and these great DPs. But there's a couple of makers of camera who seem to have the market sort of done, and some of them have been around in the motion picture business forever, and they've made the jump into digital, and it's great.
Right. Yeah. But it's always the lenses that are important, right?
Yeah.
I guess there's really not much new technology there.
No, because we keep going back to the old beautiful glass.
Polished glass.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these old, like Galileo and Kepler and all these guys, these old scientists and philosophers, a lot of them polished glass for some reason. Like they made lenses and...
Did they?
Like even Kierkegaard, I think, family business was lenses, if I'm not mistaken. Or Spinoza, one of those two. But
really?
there's a strange connection because it seemed like that was a high-tech thing, right? So I guess it's not surprising that people, 300 years ago are going to be, advanced thinking is going to be attracted to things that are advanced technology. So like lens making seemed to be like maybe what we have now with, iPhones. I don't know.
I wonder if the philosophers were kind of, they're like, we see things clearly.
They were also obsessed with like light and, the physics of it as well. Like, like what the fuck is light?
Right.
Everyone, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess, let's not, I don't want to be ignorant. There's a ton of science that goes into making these things. And I'm sure maybe these guys were on it way early. I don't know. I'm going to look into that though. Maybe that'd be, it's a cool image.
I make a connection. Yeah. Glass polishing and old-timey scientists. But yeah, we keep getting, I don't know if you follow, speaking of physics and what light is and all that, but we keep getting flooded with all these discoveries that make the universe even stranger as we go along. I don't know if you follow that stuff, but it tends to come up here. quantum mechanics. And all
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe if you mention something, it might ring a bell. I can't think of anything, but it makes me want to ask a bit. I don't know if you've done many episodes now of the show, but I wondered about the title when you first told me about it, and then as much as I learned, I didn't know that expression.
Right. Yeah, it's not very widely known, I don't think.
And then I wondered if the NBA star Kyrie Irving might be a fan, the man who...
Why is that? I don't make the
because he believes the world is flat. And and is that... What's the connection to the title of the show?
For those that want to hear more...
Right.
I mean, the first episode, actually, I kind of discuss it, but it's basically a story about... it's been 20 episodes, so I can say it again.
Yeah.
It's sometimes attributed to... The way I heard it initially was Bertrand Russell, but apparently William James is in the story as well. So some guy is giving a lecture on cosmology, and after the end of the lecture, an old lady comes up to him and says, that's a great story, young man, but actually... The world is something like sitting on an elephant that's sitting on the back of a turtle, and his response is, "Well, ma'am, then what is that turtle resting on?" And she said, "Well, that's easy. It's turtles all the way down." Right. So it's kind of like an infinite regress explanation, which I tend to see basically everywhere. Like when you get to the deep core philosophical, pick everything away, you're often left with some kind of a strange paradoxical infinite regress. There's always this weird loop. So what we're talking about when we're talking about philosophical issues seems to me kind of like an infinite conversation. So it's turtles all the way down, turtles all the way up, inside, outside, in every direction, which visually also kind of lends itself to me the way I kind of imagine when I'm thinking about physics and philosophy. I kind of see it, I try to see it in a multi-dimensional way, if that even makes sense, like a four-dimensional thing. And it's almost like, like polyhedrons that are exploding in every direction. Like it's growing, but also in. So you've got everything kind of, the universe expanding out, but the universe is also expanding in infinitely all at the same time. So it's kind of like a torus going in and out.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done a lot of psychedelics the last few years since I've seen you.
Good.
So maybe this sounds a little wacky to you.
No, it's making me. I'm just staring at you, and I'm thinking I might look like, wow, you're blowing my mind. You kind of, but it's just interesting, and I just draw comparisons to, little bits and bobs that I've sort of touched on over the last couple of years too, and like through either like mathematics or physics, and not that I sort of am attracted to those subjects all the time, but I have a good friend who writes math books.
Oh, wow.
And I had the chance to meet this legendary mathematician, and we made a little short film with him.
Who was that?
His name is John Conway. He's
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, and he's made discoveries, but I think he's considered one of the 10 most important living mathematicians. Wow. He's at Princeton. He's an English guy from Cambridge, I think. But the cool little nut of this little thing, and it's just because I think you would be interested in it, was that he agreed. So the big regret when Einstein had died was that they hadn't done enough science on the anatomy of his brain or how it was different. Now I think there's pieces of his brain that scientists have.
Yeah.
One of the pieces is at McMaster.
I was going to say, I heard that. Mm-hmm.
And so Siobhan Roberts, my friend who wrote this book on Conway, was in touch with the woman at Mac, and they decided together they wanted to convince John Conway to come and have his brain analyzed in up at Sunnybrook while living. And they wanted him to get in the machine and
that's more useful.
Do
put
tests.
an fMRI on him or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did. I followed them up there, and we did this little
cool.
thing. Yeah, it was. You know what? It sounds really cool, and it was really cool. I don't know what the results of the test ever were. I don't know if it was a success, but it was a cool idea to think that you could put like some type of measurement on someone's brain while they're in an MRI and have them do pattern tests. I mean, you mentioned these shapes, right?
Yeah.
He's really quick at doing that, right? Like that would be, he's like sort of super quick on identifying like inverted weird shapes and making them look the same. So yeah, that was cool. So anyway,
last week we had the last episode was a cognitive psychologist, and we were talking a little bit about such things. And the question comes up, like, what makes one brain more intelligent than another? Is it its capacity to do more things at once? Is it to do it faster? Is it to do it with less resistance? Is it a creative element that it's all of those things, right? Maybe, and sometimes you could have some of those features in spades and others in a diminished capacity, and you still might be a genius.
Yeah, right.
Right,
Well, and that's no, you're right,
Yeah.
because then when you're around these people, because I mean, I felt really lucky to have been around this guy. 'Cause he's a total character. I mean, if you didn't know he was John Conway, I don't want to say who you might think he was, but you would never guess that he was this world-class mathematician. Super interesting guy, funny, rather disheveled and unkempt in his look. Maybe.
That's pretty typical for mathematicians.
Right. But you wonder, so I think they did find that there was a part of his brain that was different. I know they definitely found there was a canal in Einstein's that was more enlarged or something. Or more pronounced, but I think it might compromise another part of the brain.
Exactly, yeah. So it's never going to be one explanation. It's like when they're trying to find these explanations for why a certain person is such a way genetically, and you can't often point to a single gene that does it. It's always you need like a confluence of various gene expressions to be triggered all at the same time or in a certain combination that might lead to a certain form of autism, for example. It's like it's always a different combination of things, but we're kind of used to looking for a magic bullet kind of answers to everything. And again, this is the kind of thing that you do when you dig deep, is that you find it's when you get an answer, you often have to then ask another question about that, and if nothing else, you have to ask about how you asked that question, maybe. Like to turn the tool back onto itself. And this is when you go nuts. This is the part where philosophers go off the deep end.
But keep pulling turtles away.
Yeah. And they just keep coming. But yeah, I mean, eventually you got to turn it back on to, turn thinking back onto thinking. So there's this weird loop going on, and there's bound to be some kind of there's never going to be a one-to-one correlation of truth to symbols, whatever that means, but seems like there's always a built-in discrepancy and interpretation there. Yeah, and I guess, going back to, I think, so maybe there's people who are more conscious of that than others, because I think everyone's probably using a lot of the same tools, but they're just using them in different orders or different, like accentuating different parts. But maybe if we, you read something that you love, or you watch something that you think is fantastic, and you think of, wow, how did that happen, right? I think it's just best to sort of realize that, everyone presents ideas in their own ways, right? Some of which you understand and appreciate more than others. There's always, I mean, when we're talking across each other, over 3 feet, but it's never 100% that's going across. I mean, I'm picking up bits of information, interpreting it in certain ways. You're picking up what I'm saying. Yeah. We're never getting it exactly right, but we have this dance that goes on.
Yeah, right. There is a lot of guesswork with me. I know that. I know. I know that.
Oh, there's definitely.
What is he saying? I'm gonna.
Do you find that's the case when people? Do you consider yourself confusing? Is that what you're saying?
I think at times. I'm not the most thinker. I'm not the most straightforward person, or I can come across as a real sort of. I can raise some questions, a big question mark, or get the eyebrows furrowed. But anyway,
I don't know. The last guest that we had studies aging and cognitive deficiencies and stuff. And I was just talking a little bit about how it's finally starting to get noticed in my case. There are instances where I think, oh, maybe this has something to do with age,
right?
know. Whereas I don't know if I just kind of denied it the whole time, but. Working out, and whereas I used to do a workout with the boys maybe, and then I'd be fine, a couple of, but these days I have body pains that last for a couple of days, maybe that is something, because it didn't used to be like that, right?
So there's definitely signs.
Yeah,
every day for sure. And the working out thing, I wish I could speak to more directly, because I probably don't do it enough. I did go for a big bike ride yesterday. And
I did too yesterday.
I was rather proud of myself, and I could feel that. As it felt like I'd been doing squats, today it felt like, but at the same time it made me feel great. So.
Do you bike fast, or is it?
No, I was trying to.
Okay,
I'm sure it wasn't.
I don't do that. I go very slowly.
Okay, it's a road bike that I've had for 75 years. and I took it uphill, and then I rode up the Don River actually a long way, and was trying to get going at a decent clip. I don't know.
It's hard to resist. Yeah,
compared to some of the guys in the outfitted and all the gear.
That's right.
I mean, I'm sure it looks pretty painful, but anyway, it felt good.
No, it's great. Yeah, I know. The other day I went out too, and normally what I do is I just bike towards High Park, which is pretty close to here, and that's the only bit that I'll be on the road. And after that, I go onto the trails from the park to the lake to the Humber River Valley, around on both sides of the river. And I did that last year. Actually, started in May, and actually it was kind of in a way, it was I had to do it. Like I was in a very much of a funk and a depression, and not feeling good. And just one day, I kind of just tried not to think about it. Got myself on my bike and just went out to the park, and I only felt like going maybe half a block, but I said I'll go another block, and I'll go. And before you know it, I was doing the trail, and then I just did that every day, for all summer.
Amazing.
I got in great shape. I started feeling better. My mind cleared up. It was great. And the thing is, you don't even notice it because you're just going so slowly, just kind of slow pedal, and listen to a lot of podcasts, for example, on my headphones, and. That probably had a lot to do with the fact that I've started a podcast last summer, because I was listening to so many of them as well.
Well, when you get into, as you said, you rode through the city and then you get into High Park. I mean, you can then shut off part of that sort of, you're sort of hyper aware. Speaking for myself anyway, as you're riding the city streets, you're constantly,
it's kind of stressful.
Yeah. And then when you can get in somewhere where it's just trees and a path and you can sort of be shown where to go.
Yeah. You just got to look out for the odd chipmunk that's running in front of you. Right. You don't want to run over those.
But, no, I think it's a great therapy for sure. I mean, I'm sure that was part of why I went out yesterday too. Is just like I just wanted to change channels and just go. So I should do it every day. Today I'm not, because I'm sitting with you, and that's my excuse. Tomorrow I'll be back.
That's good. So are you connected to your social media news all day long, or is that something? Are you a victim of that?
No, I'm your only guest who's never been on Facebook.
Wow.
And my wife isn't either. We never, and it was certainly no decision, no like sort of thing. There was no statement.
Wow.
It's just honestly,
you're a unicorn.
As much as I mean, I think it's fantastic. I know it's the biggest news source on the planet, and I have many close friends who spend a lot of time and are able to interact with people and converse with people all over the world. It's just, I don't know, maybe I'll get there. I don't.
No, you're probably wise not to.
I don't know. And it's not like I'm a super busy person, right? Because I'm going to say, I don't know where I'd get the time, but I'm just not, and I haven't been wired that way. So
you're not missing much. And in fact, I think a lot of people, including myself and a lot of people in my circle, have been more or less kind of having a love-hate relationship with the whole thing, and thinking for the last few years, like trying occasionally to leave and then being sucked back in. It's like classic addictive behavior to social media. And I always kind of dream in the background, oh, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can just like unplug. And you get sucked back in. Like 2 summers ago, I spent 2 months on the Aegean coast by myself, but I still had a smartphone that didn't have a great data plan, but I could still see what was going on. I couldn't fully disconnect.
Yeah. Who's missing me? I wonder who's and posting pictures of yourself on a beautiful beach. But it's and listen, I mean, I'm totally fascinated by the whole Facebook thing. If we just wanted about that one on its own, there was a cool radio doc done last year, and I won't remember who did it. I guess maybe it was a CBC thing. But it was fascinating, and it was just about how in this short amount of time how they become the news source. I mean, now the biggest, like now the New York Times is embedded in Facebook, and it's. I mean, I shouldn't speak out of a bit outside of my.
That's okay. That's what we do.
Yeah. But the point being, like, it has more eyeballs and voices than anyone, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned like the Joe Rogan podcast, as I understand it, has like 60 million hits or something like that per month, which is far more than network television gets. It's amazing.
Yeah,
what kind of reach that has, and there's no gatekeepers. There's nobody telling him he can't do this or say that. So podcast seems to be a really great, do-it-yourself kind of media thing. Yeah, I'd encourage a lot of people to do it.
Yeah, I guess you get to you get to go there when you want to go there, and get to turn it on and turn it off when you want. I mean, so it's very different than scheduled programming. Or
it's also, you can do it without looking at it.
Oh, right.
Which is different, right?
Yeah.
So you could bike, you could drive, you could.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of people are always doing something. So actually, so radio is the essence of radio, which is talk and music, auditory. That's still going to be around, I think, for
for sure.
Doesn't seem to be threatened much.
And so are Canadians, where do they exist on the sort of graph of the podcast thing? Because
they seem to be behind the curve. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Well, I'm just wondering, because as much as I love them, or I've listened to a few, I don't have them, and I know there's a spot on my phone where I can have them all lined up, and they can notify me when there's a new episode. I haven't done that, and I know also times in the car when you're on long drives and you're sort of tired of looking for the next Wilco album, what to listen to, and these are great things, right?
Yeah, and as far as the penetration, so small, it's like 3% or less or something of people that listen to. It's like a lot of room to grow. In other words, and also what's interesting is that you're finding a lot of younger demographics are keying into this, which you might not expect them to have. I mean, the stereotype of the younger generation is that they don't have the attention span, to listen to a 2-hour conversation.
Right.
But I think in a sort of way, it's kind of a reaction to this, disposable culture that I think maybe some of these young people are reacting and looking for, in-depth conversation or in-depth analysis of something.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to, the storytelling. If it's engaging stuff, I think that's, how else can you try to do it, right? Or keep people's attention. But it goes back to this sort of the branded stuff for online, or these, I've been making these short films. I'm always conscious of, or not always, but there's people conscious of, okay, well, there's a 2-minute sort of click off rate or whatever they call it.
There's research for that. Yeah, whatever. It's getting shorter.
But let's just think that we can still keep someone's attention for 12 minutes or 112.
Yeah, but I almost think that you have to kind of be looking for a long piece to jump into. Otherwise, it's not going to pop up where, here's a 85-minute documentary. I'll just watch it now. That's not going to happen, right? It's got to be kind of scheduled viewing in a way. If it's long form, you're going to say, I'm going to sit down and watch this for an hour. But whereas if it's a short video, you could just on a whim, and that's what they want you to do, just, virality of it is just to click on something if it's short enough. So there's that pressure to make it grabs you faster, shorter, which is the history of advertising and films anyway, right? Yeah. There's more car crashes to get your attention. But having this giant, communication vehicle that we have called the internet, you can find your tribe. And
that's right.
So even if there's like a small couple of people from this town, a couple of people from that town, they're kind of in the same culture, geographically not so, but with their ideas in the abstract sense. So you build a community with people all over, and there's still, I think that's very encouraging. There's peers and a market for people making weird shit, for example.
Totally.
That's good to see.
Oh yeah. No, I think there's these subcultures who found each other. And now they are bigger groups, right?
That's right. Sometimes that works against this because you get neo-Nazis finding each other. Yeah. But you got to take the good with the bad, and leave them out onto the marketplace of ideas. And if they're stupid ideas, then ridicule them. Why not?
Right. Yeah. Free speech.
That's right.
I wonder if there's little parts of this conversation where it was like the likelihood of person clicking off at that part of the conversation. Did they make it to the part where they're talking about the physics and the mathematics? Or,
right.
We'll see.
It takes a certain kind of listener, I guess. But again, all we need is a few.
Yeah,
and we're happy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We don't need to have millions. But I just mentioned Joe Rogan a minute ago, but he's kind of, in some sense, what I had said earlier about Gord Downey, in the sense that it's, he's got an audience that a lot of regular guys, that like ultimate fighting and boxing and sports and that kind of thing, that wouldn't normally talk about physics and science and stuff like that. But they listen to his podcast and they're introduced to these kind of things because he has guests on that are talking about cosmology and physics and psychology. So I think that's wonderful. Like, and how else would you have gotten that kind of content to people that are, watching MMA fighting? It wasn't going to happen, but now we can do this. And you got to think that's got to be good for, the spread of good ideas as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I've been through the list of people you've had on, and I think, all interesting in their own right. But it means that I think you can have someone on who's, talk about knitting, right? And,
sure. Yeah.
And you can learn yourself, and then you can attract the gazillions of people who love knitting. Right? But actually, I'm not kidding, because isn't it a huge subculture?
I think it is. It's part of that hipster thing. I think.
Yeah. You can actually go down and do it in one of those shops, right?
Well, just right around the corner, there was one behind Crema Coffee. There was kind of a knitting shop that they had groups there all the time. Yeah, it just recently closed. But
okay.
Yeah, because you're not going to make much money with knitting, unfortunately.
No, it's true. But somehow there was, I don't know. I don't know where that sort of fad is gone, but at a time it was all the rage.
Yeah, I'm kind of noticing that. I think this, I call it kind of this hipster, I don't know what to call it, but it's almost like there's a generational going back to old-timey things.
Yeah. Vinyl.
Knitting, vinyl. Beards, kind of the old culture thing. But I've been thinking also about that on a large scale. I wonder if that's kind of a mass cultural reaction to a coming apocalypse, if you will. Like, I mean, if we sense that there's disasters on the horizon, it kind of makes sense that segments of the population would learn how to grow their own food and make their own honey or whatever these, or knit their own blankets and that sort of thing. So I feel like unconsciously it's like we have a swarm of locusts or, or whatever we are, expressing some genes and turning into other modes of behavior.
Yeah, is it a cycle that it's always taking place? So people look back into their what used to be and feel I don't know. But
fashion seems to work that way. Yeah.
But I think a couple of these fads that are back, I don't even know if they're fads. They're just, it's technology related, or if it was knitting, they make sense. Too. Yeah. It's a way. I would think there's a therapy in knitting.
That's true.
There's a creative part of it. There's often, the stuff that people make is beautiful. So I don't know. It's another art form, but it also has a funny stigma, I think, and that's why. It's definitely funny to say, have someone on to talk about knitting, but guess what? There's probably a lot more people who would be interested to hear about that.
And I think that's maybe even some of the charm and allure of such things is that because it seems so odd and kind of unexpected, it actually attracts more people.
Yeah.
to get into
the world we live in.
Yeah. So do you have a sense of pessimism or optimism for the future? How are you? You have children. You have two now?
Yeah, two. Yeah, two kids, 11 and 7.
Wow. 7. Wow.
Yeah. I don't like going. I can't say I'm optimistic.
Well, you almost have to be if you have two kids.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why else would you have children?
Yeah. I think we're just more conscious of time being, it's life is short, and we know that. And I think our kids are going to even learn that faster than we learned it.
That seems to be the case.
It's as simple as driving around, listening to the radio with the family in the car, and the news is what the news is, right? You're not going to turn it off. Right. Every time you hear that, another 300 people died in Syria, it's like, and the kids don't react to it because it's been what they've been hearing for.
I don't know what to think about that though. It's true. I seen my, nephews and nieces when they were growing up. It seemed like they were nonplussed by a lot of things that because they're just so common, like terrorist threats. And, what is that? It's kind of like everyone's swimming in this PTSD that we're all slowly developing.
Probably. So, I mean, the other thing is that we're in an age that's super exciting, right? I mean, back to what this podcast that we're doing, this is only possible because of what's happened in the last, really a short amount of time. I don't know,
true.
20 years or whatever it is. And if this is a sign of how quickly things are moving, I mean,
and that's accelerating. Even the pace of change is changing.
Right. Exponential. Is that what happens? Yeah. Just keep. Yeah. So we're just all going to be blurry soon. Maybe everyone's just going to be loose.
You might be right. I mean, this is kind of like this techno-utopian, this trajectory that you can chart to. A lot of people will tell you that these singularity types, that around the year 2040 or thereabouts, that everything just kind of comes to a head because such extreme ramp up of computing power that you're going to have a super intelligent being essentially taking over everything. That beyond that, it becomes a situation where all bets are off. You can't predict what's going to happen after that. Once you have super intelligent.
Yeah.
AI.
You hit it because you're making me feel like I read the issue of the New Yorker that I saw yesterday, and I didn't read it, but that is the cover story.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
People are starting to talk a lot about this now. Finally, I think it's a good thing. It's an inevitable thing, but I'm if you look around, if you look at these giant corporations. They're basically, a lot of them are starting to channel money into artificial intelligence research. And I think a lot of it, if you look at the guys at Google or Elon Musk or anybody else who's doing this kind of thing, they're kind of in an arms race to take over the world, it seems. It's like whoever gets this super intelligent, power is going to have a huge advantage instantly over everybody else. So it's almost like... It seems more powerful than a nuclear weapon in the sense that you could have instantaneous control over a lot of networks and calculations and predictions and what have you. So I got to think that, are they going to let them do this? I mean, is the government going to step in? Are they constantly surveilling Google to see how far they're getting with the deep mind? And if they are, then Google, do they have now counterintelligence people that are trying to keep the government out? So are they acting like spies?
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange situation we're in right now. It's like before the birth of this new thing, whether it's nuclear or printing press. We don't even know what it's going to be, but we know there's something big coming.
Yeah, well, there's the mighty powers, but then there's the individuals who you mentioned also, like Elon Musk. I mean, when you hear that guy speak, I mean, I'm still thinking about how incredible the Tesla is as a car. He's not even talking about that anymore, right? No. I mean, that's he gave that patent up for free or whatever, let people use it. He has license to think this way, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't.
He's a very lucky guy to be in that situation. Seems like a dream.
Well, and now he can afford to think. But he earned that, right? I mean, there's a reason he is who he is. Now, when you get into these big super cores or these, that's where you're right. You can write your rule book, right?
Yeah.
And that could be. I guess.
But that's the thing. Yeah. I think a lot of people. It almost seems like people are reluctant to talk about it because they don't want to draw attention to it. It's almost like there's all these skunk works being worked out in terms of just stock trading. Like the advantage that you get if you get like a tiny micro advantage. You can make a killing with all the high frequency trading. So there's all this arms race going on between algorithms and between. How close your network is to the stock exchange. But if you have a super AI that's essentially modeling and figuring out in advance certain things, it's going to be a huge advantage for one. But who knows how many other ways, not to mention weapons. And of course, there's also the idea that the super intelligent being itself could be a threat. Not that it's being under the employment of, like Google or somebody else, but it just says, hey, I'm alive. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And that's always fun to think about.
Wow, you take me down these roads that I don't often go down. I realized, I mean, that's what you, and I'm seeing this framed piece of art behind you with the flying saucer and like Close Encounters. That
was my first live show. I
think
I did, but I changed my name since then. I used to be called Jake Jacob because that was my Twitter handle, but now I go by Jenk.
Okay. Oh, right. So I want to hear some of your music.
Yeah.
You should put you should do that. There's no theme music on the...
No, that's the thing. Yeah, I might. Well, this last episode 20, we for the first. Well, when I first started the podcast, in the first description of it, I said I would do a monologue at the beginning, dialogue conversation with the guests, like we're doing now, and then the third part of it would be some music that was based on the snippets from the conversation.
Oh,
I never got around to doing that until this last episode. So episode 20, I did that. And I'm hoping to do it for your episode as well. Right. So some of this conversation, I will take some pieces of it and make a song out of it.
Oh, great. And it's just going to be starting to fade up right now, right over our voices, right?
If we end right.
Yeah.
No, but
wow.
So that's
cool.
That's kind of the goal. I guess I'm, as always, it's kind of a lazy decision. I want to put all my art into one package.
Yeah, you've got this platform, and now, I mean, why
might
not?
as well put it out.
Right?
Yeah. So, and in fact, the monologue is kind of like a stepping stone towards comedy. To be honest, it's getting comfortable talking by myself, to an audience. And I've done a open mic once, and I hope to do more of them in the next year. So yeah, and in fact, we're gonna have a comedy show in here. We're gonna have a few professional comics and an open mic.
Fantastic.
Happening. You seem like you could be suited for such a thing.
I went to, I don't know. I mean,
I think you could have a dry kind of a
couple tall whiskeys. But I went to the Toronto, what is it called, the TO Sketch Fest a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, how was that?
It was great, and it just
all sketch.
And it just happened to be in town. It was a Friday night, and I went up to a place at Bloor in Ossington. Oh yeah, there's a couple of them there, but
that's where I did the
comedy. You go downstairs.
It's a lower, yeah. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, comedy club or something very sort of
on the nose.
On the nose name, right? And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
No, but again, it was just because it's just the energy you get from these the comics who get up, and they've got the bright lights on them, and you're 5 feet away.
Yeah.
And a couple of them, the place was howling.
Wow.
And it just
great energy.
Yeah, there's an amazing energy there that you and I'm sure that's why comics do it, right?
Yeah, it's a dopamine burst.
It's got to be like nothing else.
That's right.
And how do you
that's why it attracts so many narcissists.
Yeah, right.
Look at me, listen to me.
Yeah.
I have a podcast.
Yeah. But it's a certain and we all have our favorites, right? But it's the ones that kind of are sort of more, they're not racing to the joke as much as just sort of, they have a funny take on something that we all have experienced. So anyway, that's great that you're going to do comedy in here. I'd love to see it.
Grab the mic.
Yeah. I don't know if I do that. Have I ever tried it? I don't know. There's the odd time where I think that joke could work in front of a bunch of half drunk people, but then of course.
You store it away and bring it out. Bring out your bit when you're having drinks with friends.
Some fantasy would be like if you were ever in a club and the comic didn't show up, and they'd say, "Is there anyone here who can take this for the next 7 minutes?" Yeah. And you'd hope to be the person who go, no problem.
Of course,
right?
Andy.
Yeah. and then you go up and you would just have nothing, and then you just rely on you just rely on a funny facial expression, or turn your pockets inside out, and then maybe that would be good.
I think that's what Robin Williams and Jim Carrey might have started. I mean, it's just like if you don't have anything to say, just do something wacky, and then comedy comes out of it somehow. If you have that inclination, kind of like improvising. I took a Second City improv course this past winter. It was just level 1. I think they have 6 levels to it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. It was a lot of fun. I kind of felt like I wish I'd started at level 2 maybe, because, but that's just my impatience speaking. But it seems like you have to kind of do all these exercises, mainly I think to get over your shyness and to be able to speak in front of a crowd. And then it seems like then we can do some weird and wacky shit. And I didn't follow through, as with a lot of things. I don't follow through.
So you just did the first level?
Did the first level. I might go back to the second, but that seems to be a key thing. Improv. It's great for people to try out.
There was a time there was a time I used to go to watch the improv. It was Tuesdays after 10 or something. The main stage was done, and then the same people would take the stage and do some improv, and it was it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a real gift, I think. Talk about being fast on your feet.
Yeah. Well, when you did that Alive and Cooking, was it improv or was it?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, no. There were sort of
Larry Sanders.
Let's
type?
call them. Yeah, let's call them. There were moments, right? But
yeah,
I mean, as far as putting food together and talking about it, yeah, that wasn't scripted. We knew what we were going to make, bacon and eggs, and then the other characters who were sort of part of the behind the camera, the crew. We scripted a bit of stuff. They knew what their character was like, and then they ran with it. And so I would say it was kind of half and half.
Yeah, I think I'd like to watch that again. That was fun.
Yeah.
What's the timing like? How are you doing for time?
I feel like
at this point we can wind it down or take a break.
No, I think we should. Let's wind it down.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do that?
Well, we just keep talking, and then a few minutes later we stop.
No, the fader goes up on that first song.
I could do
right?
that, yeah.
On that.
Right. That's what I did last. Exactly.
The music that you're writing for Alive and Cooking, which.
Well, I mean, actually, remember, I'm going to take some of what you said, some of your words, and make music, and at the end of it, it will start to fade in.
Yeah.
Right about now. So I'm going to say, thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Thanks so much.
High five.
Okay. Cheers, man.
Thank you. Take care. There's a way for people like, 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 it's almost 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 like,
the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
What he's singing, that's right, love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's singing, that's right, love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know it's the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
It's just the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
What he's singing, that's right, love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's singing, that's right, love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
It's the music we love, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
what he's singing.
That's right.
Makes me love, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's saying. It's the music we love.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's saying. It's the music we love.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost,
Yeah.
but it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right. Like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost like, oh, it's almost,
Yeah.
but it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, that's right. Like, oh, it's almost 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 like, oh, it's 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 almost like, oh, it's 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 almost like,
distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're make me not know was to make me not know was to in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're make me not know was to make me not know was to in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're make me not know was to in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance in the rearview mirror, but they're in the distance.
It's turtles all the way down. Now then, what is that turtle resting on? Okay, so well, that's easy. It's turtles all the way down. Now then, what is that weird loop going on, and there's this weird loop going on. There's this weird loop going on, and the creation of truth to.
So maybe there's people who are more conscious.
There's this weird loop going on, and there's this weird loop going on. Creation of truth to.
So maybe there's people who are more conscious.
But, I mean,
pulling turtles away.
Yeah, tool back onto itself, and this is when you go nuts. This is the part where
pulling turtles away.
Yeah. So you've got everything kind of the universe expanding out. The universe is also expanding infinitely all at the same time. So it's kind of like a torus. Is this weird loop? So what we're talking is this weird loop. So what we're talking about when we're talking about philosophical issues seems to me kind of thing, and it's almost like it's almost like polyhedrons that are exploding in every direction. It's almost polyhedrons that are exploding in every direction. But also,